In today's episode,
here is a janitor story that I've been told since a while. It exists. Okay.
Richard's roller coaster time machine,
100-year-old equipment.
taking us to the 50s and back,
I think we're gonna have to do some translations for the younger listeners.
That's how it works.
and into the future.
I'm an old school raver from the very long time, and I'd be out there, but I'd be on call. And sure enough, at 3 a.m. when the party's going good, here comes this phone ring.
Welcome to Cisco Tech Stories. A podcast with real-life stories from real-life engineers. Your hosts are Nicholas and Tristan.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Cisco Tech Stories podcast, a podcast where we interview experts on their craziest and most interesting troubleshooting stories, where we learn about new technologies and fascinating individuals. We're your hosts, Nico and Tristan, Cisco engineers in EMEA. Hello, Tristan.
Hello, Nico. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
So, in this episode, we have a slightly different format. Our guest has so many different interesting stories that we could have an entire podcast just for them. I'm not kidding. He's been in the industry for decades, and his expertise covers such a large landscape, from literally mechanical phone switchboards to 5G and AI. It's really not killing at all. On top of that, our guest has learned so many life lessons along the way, so let's make sure to stick to the end, because this episode will be a roller coaster, trust me. Let me introduce you to our guest today, Richard Yates, Senior Technical Leader in Cisco CX Service Provider Mobility Group. Hello, Richard.
Hey, how are we doing today? Doing lovely.
Awesome.
Happy holiday season.
Richard, tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do, and what's your technology that you're working with?
Wow. So I'll give you a brief rundown. I'll see if I can do this in one breath real quick. So when I was a young kid, my dad was in the Air Force and he was in telecom. My dad spliced cables. He put up antennas, central office switches when it was the old Stroger stepper switches from like 1888. And I was always wondering how, when I pick up the phone at my house, did it go outside, go up this pole, cross these wires, and literally right down the street and ring my friend's phone. That used to bug my mind, and I was a young kid, and I was always tinkering with stuff, taking apart clocks and things of my grandparents when I was very little, putting them back together. So my dad kind of sort of explained to me, well, there's a central office. All the cable comes from everywhere. It goes into the central office, and that's where things go back out to other buildings, right? And inside the central office is a telephone switch. I go, okay. I was like, maybe 12 years old. And growing up, we grew up around the world. So when we get back to the States, and I'm DJing at a young age, 10, 11 years old, just the very early 80s, we like 79, 80. And as much as I didn't want to be like my dad, after high school, I wound up going into the Air Force. And lo and behold, I got in this central office telephone switching and became an apprentice journeyman to learn this trade as it was back then, right? This old switch had springs on it. I had a spring bender in my toolbox because everything was make and break contacts. We had a 10,000 line exchange when I first get in there.
No software at that time, only hardware.
No, we had touch tone converters though. So instead of rotary dial, the commanders on a base, they had the push button phones. So, and that touch tone came out in maybe the 40s or 50s. And so I'm working on this 100-year-old equipment, and the cable in the back was silk. So when we cut over in 1990 to a Nortel MSL 100 straight digital, I took a year and a half of knowledge and just, it's out the window. Didn't really see it much again. There's a lot of countries that kept it around. Now it's just nostalgia. It's in a museum and stuff. But that's how I got my introduction into telecom, was from my father, and then going into the Air Force.
That's a cool story.
A lot of people actually have Air Force background and worked in telecommunication, at least in Cisco, the people I've met. It seems like a great school is not the word, because I mean it's not school, right? It's real life, but it's a great place to learn.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I thank Uncle Sam because I've got friends out here at Cisco and other places over the years. Man, they've got a heap of college debt. And I got none. I never had any, right? And it's yeah. So the Air Force was basically a proving ground for telecom, because if you were in the Army or the Marines or the Navy, you went to the Air Force Telecom School. Literally right here in Texas. It's about 2 hours from where I'm at right now. And I went to school. I learned 6 months or 3 months of just electronic principles, and then 9 months of the telephone switching and how it's all put together, how it works, how you get dial tone, how that when you pick up your phone at your house or some office building, how that all worked. And it was just actually, now as I'm thinking back, because I was definitely an amazing experience and a great place to learn. And that 12 month, or let's see, 9, 10, 11, yeah, that year of school I went to is now shrunk into a 6 weeks school. So I learned how to splice cable. I can splice some fiber optics. You did everything back then.
I was going to ask that question. I'm like, okay, maybe it's jumping the gun and going too quickly, but you're bringing the topic again. When you went from analog Telecom Central to a fully digital one, you said it was like starting all over again in a way. But it feels to me like in a career, you never really start over. Even if you move to something completely different, you still acquired a lot of skills and knowledge. And you seem to now imply the same, right?
Yeah, definitely. And even with 5G right now, these 5G phones, if you want to call somebody, all that basic of how it worked is still there. There's not much different. We're going to change out that cable to your house, to your cell phone. We're going to just say, hey, we're going to send it to a radio station, basically, that's sitting in a tower somewhere that somebody owns a frequency for, So, yeah, definitely a great place to learn.
Being in Wi-Fi, we have a lot of people in Cisco that are amateur radio. They've been doing radio in the Navy and some of that, and all of that knowledge, like how antenna works. This hasn't changed. It's still the same principles, and they're actually so good because right now you directly jump the gun and learn to program the stuff and use the stuff. You never learn how it's made, right? And back then you didn't have a choice. You had to make it yourself. You had to make it from scratch. So
a lot of things.
It's still very valuable knowledge.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that hop to the MSL 100, it was a 10,000 line exchange, and then we had we had two remote MSCs that hung off of that were all tied together. So we had trunks, a T1 trunks in and out, going back and forth. Before that T1 came in, we had Proctors, which were we had two. It was 4 and 6 wire E&M. That's what they called it, and that's what went off the military base down to in the U.S. They had what they call Ma Bell. They were regional Bell operating companies, which provided dial tone for everybody. You didn't have an option. There was one phone company.
I think we're going to have to do some translations for the younger listeners. So T1 was like 1 megabit, something like this, right?
1.5.
1.544 megabits, right? And let me explain it another way. So I was always into music, and I DJ'd, and I work in this music studio. I've got my stuff together. So a mixing board has 24 channels on it, right? So you can plug in a guitar and a bass and 5 kits of drums and have 24 microphones out there having input. But going out, if it goes into some recording equipment, it's an RCH, 2 wires, right? And going out to your PA system, 2 wires going to your speakers. So I think of it like this. A T1 is a mixing board, right? But instead of going to those speakers, it goes to your living room, for example, or another office. And the other office has another mixing board of 24 channels. And it comes in there and it breaks back down. So it leaves 24 into one. All right. So you have 64 kilobits per channel, and 24 channels is 1.544 megabits per second was the speed. And that went to a CSU, DSU is what multiplexed all those 24 phone signals out. And they had a DS0. They called it, Give me a second. It was like a breakout box that you could get 2 wires out of each one of those circuits to send to this way or that way. Oh, it's called a D channel. So these D channels would demux everything, and boom, there you go. Now you had 2 wires going everywhere. So the way, I'll share something with you later. I was at Cisco one day, and I just was studying some AI like 2 years ago, and I wrote up this thing real quick. It came to me fast of how I could associate anything I did with music, even up to the 5G point of understanding how frequency works, how the T1 worked. So the T1 was the big transmission unit back in the day. And 1.544 megabits was fast, but you only had 64K on one channel, and you didn't even have that. You had 56 kilobits because we needed 8 bits of overhead for signaling. So each one of those channels could signal down to the other end. Am I on hook or off hook? On or off, right? So that's how that would work right there, was just by the signaling there. A little while later comes out of band signaling. So now we got clear 64-bit on there, because we would take those T1s, and I think on the Nortel switch, you could do 966 of those, or 900 and something. I think 984. And the out of band signaling was SS7. And then like 1990, there was PRI. It was ISDN, which stood for I see dollars now, or I still don't know. So at the end, the BRI would be local. You had a phone on the BRI, which would have 2 19.2 circuits, and two high speed and 6 low speed. So you could still have those phone calls and push some data, a little bit of data, right across that 2-wire pair, which eventually becomes DSL, and ISDN was used in the bigger operators for their heavy traffic, and then soon you would take those T1s when we got like FMT 150. Nortel made it, but then you had Fujitsu and Rockwell and some other people that made these boxes where you could take all these different T1s, take 28 of those, stick them together, and you have a DS3 signal now. And that was still on coax, so you hadn't even hit the fiber yet. Eventually, you would take 3 of those DS3s, which had 28 T1s each on them, and that was your first optical sonnet signal. And so you would have an OC3 at that point. And that was it was in the early 90s. And then that eventually gets muxed up until you could have these 760, whatever it was, 764, I believe, 765 Opteras, which were just those kept stacking up. So OC12, OC24, and then you wind up with OC48s being a go-to thing, and you had them on these sonnet rings. And so your circuit could come up, run around a ring. If the ring breaks, it will go the other way. So you always had 2 paths around a ring to get from me to you with your traffic.
What I love with those those technologies and protocol is that OC48 is still a multiple of a ISDN channel from 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah. No different. So that's why. So even now, like ATM failed. That was going to be the big thing. ATM. I'm like, I saw a lot of things come and go. Some products make it, like even ISDN, that winds up failing to have it sitting on your desktop, but not for people pushing big data. Right, that was the thing back in the day, because they could do out-of-band signaling, and now their T1s, they could stack them together. And when you had what they called dialable bandwidth, we had some big companies here, Sears, J.C. Penney, and some people. So when they would do orders off the phone, they take all that information at night, and they would stack their T1s together, and they would dial it up, and you could pick out however much bandwidth you needed, and then they could send all their orders over to the processing center. Right, from people calling in from a magazine. Amazing.
I have a question from young me, traveling 20 years ahead through time, to ask you. So when I was a kid, I was dreaming of ISDN because I had the dial-up modem, and to me ISDN was the future, because you had more bandwidth, it was digital. And then time passes and we have broadband, but it's DSL over analog. And I'm
Yeah.
asking, can you have DSL over ISDN? And I'm being told, yeah, but there's less throughput because ISDN, it books more out of the DSL bandwidth, so you get actually less DSL throughput. So
Yeah.
why ISDN never became a thing for end users in reality? Like, why are we still having analog lines here now? We have digital TV on it. We have a lot of cool stuff on it, but it's still an analog line to my house.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, because at some point, like, even if we have analog lines to our house now, they're not even DSL, they're digital, and they come over the fiber with your internet and your TV.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. They're fiber until the street. You're right.
Yeah. Well, in the US, we got fiber to the curb. It's to your house.
Yeah.
And
They're deploying that a bit everywhere now, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. But you had the same curiosity I had when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good.
And I guess the answer then is the service providers think it's better to just deploy the fiber up to your house rather than change the lines to digital, right? It's like, let's just keep this
Right.
step and move to fiber. But they're taking their sweet time depending on where you live, right?
Yeah, it depends. Right. There's a lot of that, because you have these here. You have municipalities. They're going to let you, or they're not going to let you come in that area. And to run fiber, for whether you're an AT&T here, a big company, or some internet service provider, or whoever it is, you have to have a right of way. And just like the radio, somebody owns a frequency license to transmit, whether it's your car radio or anything else, or even these mobile phones. You'd have to have a license the same way to get a right of way. So now you have to go down to the city courts and all the planning people, and and they have to come and mark all their cables. You have to do a ton of stuff, and maybe put some money in some pockets under the table to get into this area where you can come and get a backhoe and dig up their streets, drill some fiber in there, and get it up to the corner. So what is to the house, you're right. It used to have DSLAM boxes everywhere, which brought you DSL. But now it's like, man, we're already in your neighborhood. How much farther we got to go, So they would come in and do neighborhoods at a time, and they would come out. Verizon was one. AT&T is fiber now, and a couple other people, but they would come out and have people not just cold knocking on your door. Hey, we're going to be bringing fiber through here. Are you interested in it? And so that way they could gauge their footprint of what they might have. So if I got, let's just say round numbers, I got 100 people in the neighborhood and there's 70 people want fiber, here I come. 10 people want fiber and they want to stay. I like it how it is. It works. Okay, probably not a good option to go there until you get some churn over of people in that neighborhood selling their homes and things like that.
And some places went to 5G directly as well, right? They skipped the fiber part, they skipped the coax part. Let's go 5G directly.
Yeah, we even got Starlink hooked up to our T-Mobile system now. So if you're walking in the desert or you're in the woods where RF doesn't work real well, in the woods, it works great over water, but not in the woods. So it's the same thing there. 5G, man, I'm using my hotspot now. Right now, and it does great. And here at T-Mobile, I can probably run a speed test right now, and I'm going to get 600-700 meg down.
Yeah, pretty good.
And about
better than over here.
About 70 meg up, but I'm in the middle of the city right now, so I'm not going to get it. I live out by the lake, just a little bit away from people.
I have a question on that same topic again. So at some point in time, I was hearing anyway, forget about DSL. It's going to be cheaper for the service providers to do the last mile over the air. So 4G, whatever. And
WiMAX.
I remember a time where, WiMAX. I've been supporting WiMAX at Cisco. And there was no official 4G, right? There was LTE being tested in Asia. Yeah. And WiMAX is going to be the 4G. And anyway, some service providers were selling over the air, whatever wireless technology is going to be the thing. And now what we see is people like 5G on their phone, but some people have 5G in their houses. But it seems Starlink is now doing a better job connecting those remote people, because 5G, you need to be somewhat close to the tower anyway, and when there's a lot of people, 5G can be saturated as well, right?
Yeah, and then even these towers got WiMAX on it and other stuff, right? They're combo towers, and so think as a service provider, I'm in a mountainous area. So, and for years, even in TDMA mobile days, man, how do people get stuff up in the mountains? You think they pulling cable up there? Oh, they got a microwave shot, and that's all. It's good. Now we're going into microwave point to point from maybe your MSC, up on a tower, and boom, now we're going to another tower, and to another tower, and then these operators figured out, hey, I could give you a T1 in your house back in the day, straight off of this guy. So there's been, even back in the day, data available, but you had to pay for that amount, pay for that stuff. But you could get a T1 microwave shot straight to your house if you were in the right area. But that's coverage. If you're in the footprint, yeah, you get it, and if not, find something else. Yeah.
So the answer is probably like a combination of whatever is the most economical, most practical, right? Depending on situation.
Most efficient, and saving your resources, saving time, saving money, saving man hours. How cheap can I get it to you and still provide a quality product?
It seems like it's the answer for everything, because there's always like this religion war. People say, oh, Wi-Fi is dead, there is 5G. And now, you have the Wi-Fi people, the 5G people, and then the fiber people. And it's always like, my solution is going to be the go-to. Oh. And reality is like, yeah, all of those are cool. And depending on situation, a combination will be used, or sometimes just one, sometimes two, wherever it makes sense.
Yeah. So let me bring my career along with this. So I get out of the Air Force, since we went over to Nortel, and I wanted to be a task guy because they're like gurus. They knew everything when you called them to work in a technical assistant. And since I was in the military, that was the government at Nortel. Like we have government at Cisco people work with the FedRAMP and all these other things. Well, I was like, shoot, man, let me go in here. It was called bids and scope dial. So as soon as I get out of the Air Force, the manager is like, I went to one spot, and and my wife didn't like it in St. Louis. It was cold. So within 3 months about coming out of the Air Force, this dude has been trying to get in contact with me for 3 months that I got out. And this guy from Nortel that I worked with, his name was Mark Bales. And he's like, you ready to come to work for Nortel? I was like, I've been looking for you. And he goes, well, come on. So I was like, I'm already in Dallas. I just moved here. He's like, come on over. They hired me over the phone. Didn't even want to know anything about me. They already knew from working with me for 4 years back and forth through the Air Force, doing MSC upgrades and things like that, and keeping it, doing half the system at one time, keep it functionable, and then do the other half, or switch over and then do the other half. And you never lost dial tone. You never lost any of your trunking and things like that as well. So what you were just saying, how do we solve these last mile problems and stuff? So I get out and work for Nortel, and I traveled. I started TDMA. I did US Cellular, and there was only Cellular One, and they sold a franchise by name. Otherwise, they were mom and pop companies. You didn't have an AT&T. You didn't have a Verizon. They didn't sell mobile stuff. They were on long distance systems, long distance, and local dial tone that they called a CLEC here, which would be that last guy at last end office. And here, we'll give you the dial tone, because we got the least amount of cable, right? And we got it running all over the city. We got a monopoly on things, right? So they got broken up in 1984. AT&T did, because they had a monopoly. Then they had a divestiture again in 96, and they broke them back up. So I get out and I go to work for Nortel, and I put in all these mobile systems for all the companies around here. And then it was just an MSC and a cell site. We didn't have anything else on the system. And that's how I learned computers. I never even messed with one. I mean, I had one, but like when I left, my parents sold my car and got their first computer in like 87. And then my dad gets into Dune and playing all these games on it. He's retired at that point, retired from the Air Force at that point. So, but I always was able to confide in him about telecom. So he enjoyed me explaining what I was doing in the world, right? So we wind up turning on Sprint. That was another one, Sprint. We turned the Sprint system on. We combined with Qualcomm to make a chip to put in our card to demux things. Well, it's coming in off of fiber from a cell site. And then by then you have a base station controller, which controls all the cell sites. And we took the RAM and the CPU, and everything was being consumed on the one mobile switching center that they had. And now we have a base station controller, a MSC and a BSC. So now you've got what they call RAN, radio access network there. And then you still had the mobile switching center. So let's fast forward on up into 3G. All right. So as we build these systems and stuff, they advanced, but the MSC never changed. Stayed the same. It's still pretty much the same. Only LTE changed things, right? So with 3G, you had to have a hybrid call. 4G, you could have a true 4G LTE call. With 3G, they could have hybrid, so it would be split. If it depend on your backhaul, your back end, and things like that. So at some point, let's see, and I'll flash forward a little bit. I wound up going to work for IP Access out of Cambridge, and they made femto, nano, pico, and femto cells, and they were in 72 countries and in the U.S. And man, they picked me up really fast. So when you say Wi-Fi, I go, ha! We got offloading because these things were in building wireless, and you could connect. It was a little small, looked like a football, right? And a nano, pico, and femto. We had a 2G BS, 2G they came with a BSC. It was just a server, a little small server rack, 19-inch with maybe 4 slots wide, high. So these things would have 100 cell sites on them. And this back end 2G, we had a GB link that went right back to the MSC in 2G. And so as you move forward, T-Mobile's our big customer here, so they don't do residential service like AT&T and everybody else. So one of our things were with T-Mobile, they did enterprise stuff. So we would take these and put them in the building. They would have companies that would do enterprise stuff. You could put them in the building. You have 5 bars in the building, and the backside of that base station controller went right back to their MSC. Wi-Fi is not the same. So when we talk about mobile systems, right, and we have this tower that's got too much channel on it, and what happens when all your channels are full? You get overloaded, right? Say a hurricane comes through here, a tornado, everybody picks up their phone to call mom, are you okay? Well, going all the way back to that original system I learned on, you had 20 switches in each one of these bays, and it had a distributor at the end. And if you had a good ear, you could go into the switch room and listen to that 1800 thing go, there's a problem over there. So at 20 switches per bay, you might have had 100 or 200 lines that hung off of that bank. So everybody can't pick up the phone at the same time and get dial tone. So it's called 19% trunking. So 19 people would get dial tone. Guess what happens when that 20th person picked it up? That last switch would go up and drop, go up and drop, go up. They couldn't get it. It kept rounding and around it. When you hang up the phone, click, boom, someone else could get that switch. And when they say switch, I say, what switch? I got 10,000 of them back here in the back. So if you were smart, you knew which switch you were, and customers would go like, hey, I know what switch I am. So if you knew their phone number, I could tell you what bay they are in. You could follow that right all the way through to the line finder, selector, another selector, and a connector. And the connector was the one when you see in the old Hawaii Five-0 movies, don't hang up the call, we're tracing the phone call. Yeah, if the last person hangs up, it drops the whole switch train. You'll never know where they called you from. So if you could trace a call in less than 2 minutes, you were good. I did it in 90 seconds. And you have to read these schematics, and you'd have to run around this room to figure out how this thing was all connected. And you couldn't commit it to memory. It was impossible, because you'd have to read all these different schematics. So as we get up there into these femto and pico cells, we're connected right to the mobile network. So mobile operators loved it. I could go put these things in a building, and you could hook up a what do they call that antenna array? The antennas in the building that run around, a D ring or some array of antennas on each floor, right? And you could plug into that, and they run Wi-Fi off of it too. But our real Wi-Fi, our small pico and nano femto cells, if that cell site had too much traffic on it, and it didn't matter what G it was, it would offload onto one of those nano pico cells, because I know, hey, you're a neighbor of that macro tower, and you go over here, the micro sites that are in there, maybe there's 4 floors, there might be 8 sites, would say a small building, 2 on each floor, 1 at each end of the floor, and they have to know who each other is, so they're all neighbors, right? And then they all know that the tower outside as a neighbor, and maybe another tower too. So if you walk outside, you boop, 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 hop right back over, seamless. Yeah, that's how it works. So the Wi-Fi, when they got it in there, and access points, I would see them all the time, and I knew what they were, but it didn't matter to me because I wasn't really working on that. And at some point, I picked it up too as well. That hey, you can walk in here and get on Wi-Fi. That's great. And so, like when my wife, my wifey, she goes, "Hey, there's no Wi-Fi here. That's not gonna." I don't know how many times I've explained. I was like, it doesn't matter. You need the back end. It's got to go somewhere. So when I tell her that, and she's always on and off with the Wi-Fi, I'm just like, yeah, but where's your internet coming from?
Doesn't matter. People blame the Wi-Fi. When internet is bad, it's the Wi-Fi. That's what people
Yeah.
have in their
Good,
mind.
good. They can take the blame on the Wi-Fi. I don't care. No problem for me.
So at that point in time in your career, you're still not working for Cisco, right?
Well, no.
Okay. See what's next.
2000. Yeah. So that's like 2008. I ran my own business for a while, and I got rid of some middleman after I left Nortel. I left there over dress code. I didn't talk to any sales. I didn't talk to any customers. We were internal. I talked to field engineers from Nortel. They put a dress code on us: khaki pants, tuck your shirt in, no sneakers, no baseball caps. I'm like, see ya. No, they threw about 15 grand. This is in 98 or so, 99. There's 15 grand cash to stay. No, not doing it. I'm going over here because there I was straight time. You worked a lot of hours. And a lot of other people I know, they get time and a half. So I went over to another place for the same salary plus time and a half when I worked over 40 hours. So I was going to make more money there than that little 15,000 he threw on the desk there. And I was like, you're funny. So I said, you'll be gone. Well, they come in and clean house, and I got a contractor's package, and I got bonded for like $2 million, which only cost like $2,500. So when I got that, and then I could work right for Nortel again. So I was right back in the T-Mobile office, right back in the Verizon office, doing the same thing. Everybody knew me still. Didn't matter what company, because they're doing it for so long. I know most of the folks that ran their different, what are data centers now, their mobile switching environment. So I made more money contracting back to Nortel than they were ever paying me, charging them $150 an hour back in the 90s. Early 2000. Oh yeah, but they didn't pay. They didn't pay so often. It's not like a paycheck. Yep, it's supposed to pay you every 90 days, but it wound up being like 6 months. So you have to stretch your money, pay your bills, and do everything. You could wind up in the bad end if you don't keep your contracts lined up and keep the next thing coming in. So eventually, I got tired of doing that. And then I did 2004. I did U.S. Cellular. I became the subject matter expert. They hired me to be the liaison between them and Nortel when they put in their CDMA network. This is 2004. And I put in their first 2 turnkey full CDMA systems in Oklahoma City and then East St. Louis. Nobody wanted to go there. Everybody's afraid to go there. They've heard bad stories. And I'm from the hood. I'll go in there. I ain't worried about it. And so I did that. And then I went back and traveled. I flew all the way around the country, and I did 30 of their different switches from all the different places that they have. And they had stuff like up in the mountains at the ski resorts, and they had the light frequencies spectrum for the places that the big guys wish they had. So if you go to certain places on vacation, you're going over the U.S. Cellular Network. And so here they have what they call the North American Cellular Network. They did all the arrangements for roaming and interconnect agreement. So U.S. Cellular was making a ton of money and didn't really need a ton of customers because everybody else would take their mobile phones up there and have to use their service. And like 2008 is when I went to IP Access and for Cambridge and did the small nano pico cells, which I'll tell you an interesting story on one of those since we want to do a crazy troubleshooting thing. And then I came to CIS. I went, they did, after 5 years, they had layoffs. They did some downsizing, but basically Cisco in 2009 and 8 and 9, Cisco bought our stuff and used it for AT&T, and it was called the 3G microcell. And they took it out of our box and put it into a Scientific Atlantic case. So now you got another company involved that would take the board out and stick it in another thing with AT&T logo on it. And AT&T sold those things in their stores. So if you didn't have 5 bars at your house, go buy one of these. And guess what? You're paying for the backhaul. You're paying for the electricity. And you're paying because you got internet in your house. They go, yeah, just plug it in your internet. You got broadband, you're good. People weren't thinking. And so if you had I told my mom, at that time, she goes, oh, when I go down to Florida, I get bad signal every time. Mom, get one of these. Just tell them you need one. They won't even make you pay for it. So if you were in a hard area where they didn't get much service and the mobile operator either couldn't get the frequency spectrum license or put up a tower out there if they had enough people, if it was like that last mile, if it was feasible or economical or worthy to do it, they did it. So until then, my mom got a free 3G microcell. It's stuck right there. And I'm like, hey, Mom, that's what I'm doing at IP Access. They sell it to Cisco. They unbox it. They put it in another box. And then they sell it, and they get software rights with it too. And they sell it to AT&T. And you got one free. So and they had a small downsizing, and that was 2012, and I went to work for a private company that made a 3G, 4G system in a box. They had 2 antennas, and you run it out like, run that way, run one this way, and it's literally in a suitcase. And private company, and this guy is selling to the U.S. government, but he's also selling to the Free Syrian Army. He's playing both sides. And so I worked there for like 2 years, 2012 to 2014. And I had a conflict of interest because I would come in at work up there in the morning, and I would see a thing. They kept CNN running in the office on the TV, and I know the war is going on, and they're Syrian anyway. Let me throw that in there too. The guy's Syrian, and he brought all his family and cousins and everybody over and put him to work with his company, even if he didn't like them. So I give him that respect. But what I didn't like was playing both sides and waking up in the morning and you see all these kids got bombed and killed and things like that. And then I get this call from Syria, from I guess it's the Free Syrian Army, that, hey, this box, it's not working. It's not working at all. And I go, well, what's wrong with it? They go, well, the building got hit by a tank last night. Can you send me a picture? That box is all melted. I said, I can't fix that. I'm not going to be able to fix this. But I had a conflict of interest there, though, because these kids are, not surviving. And to me, I'm like, no, I can't. I'm just having a hard time sleeping, I'm supporting this, some kind of way. All right. On a side note, the U.S. government's over there for the Army. They got their systems too. He's selling to both sides. Slightly different suitcase, right? And it was 2 E-Node Bs that they would run out there. So I got tired of that. And so here's a funny story from that. Troubleshooting that, not that box, because it was blown up. But I have to send you another one. But they would call me at 3 a.m. I was in Baltimore at the time, and I would be out at a rave. I'm an old school raver from the very long time, and I'd be out there, but I'd be on call. And sure enough, at 3 a.m. when the party's going good, here comes this phone ring. We don't have no data on number 12. And okay, I'd whip out the laptop, sit in my car, figure things out. Oh, your link is down, and their satellite backhaul link, and it would come back to the U.S. for the other end. And so you're toll skipping. You're not paying for long distance. There's a lot of bad stuff that was happening there. Right now, you're not paying for you're not paying your fees for these services. So I was just like, oh, this is not good. And so I go there and I'd fix the thing. And okay, can you go check if you got data now? Because you need to be within 2 kilometers of one of those antennas in the boxes, so you could get around there. And they go check and come back. Yeah. Of course, I'm running a PCAP too. I know they got data. I just want to hear what they're telling me at this point. And he goes, yes, okay, everything is working fine. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you, And I got to be friends with these guys over time, talking back and forth. Well, at least I think of, friendly conversations and things. And the first thing they would do to go test the data, these are everybody that was in Syria. I don't know who these folks were, but they're Middle Eastern. And BigLargeTurkishGirls.com. I was like, you're in a war zone, and the first thing you do is go to the porn site to check your data. Is your phone okay? That's is your
It,
laptop surviving? That's what I would be more concerned about at that time.
it was just their homepage. I mean, it's just the homepage.
So that was fun. That was always funny to me. Hilarious. And then,
Okay.
so I didn't like that. So as I was like, I'm done. When I saw the thing on CNN, and like 30 kids were wounded off maybe one of those missiles or something, and I go, I'm done. I'm going into work today, and I'm gonna tell them I quit. As soon as I get to work, they go, hey, you need to go downstairs and talk to HR. There was only 200 people that worked here at this private company, right? And this guy's making tons of money with the same software from 1991 that basically was kind of Nortel-ish, but he's had this mobile system in a box since 91, and they're still using the same thing, right? And they're selling it to people. I don't know how it happens, but yeah, so I was interviewing. I was like, I'm leaving, and they go, we're leaving. Well, good, because we're laying you off. You and this dude and that dude and everything, because you got the shortest tenure here, and then we're gonna get rid of that guy and that guy because they were downsizing. Okay, fine with me. So at this point, I'm on interviews with T-Mobile, and I've never worked for a mobile operator. Yeah, I've always worked with the vendor, IP Access and Nortel and Cisco. And they're like, well, we're looking for an RF engineer. Oh, okay, I'll do that. We're looking for the lead RF engineer to do our national 4G rollout. Okay.
Wow.
Now, once again, we got that combo antenna. We got WiMAX. You've got a lot of things to think about, right? And then I've driven a truck, and when it was putting the TDMA stuff, man, I know how to do the RF testing. I know how to hit the radio channels and the old Miami Vice Don Johnson phone, best phone ever. I could unlock the locate register and find the control channel and add 21. Bloop. That's the frequency I need to get on to get me a free phone call or get some data. And so I'm doing this, and I'm in the running. I made it to the last two. They're trying to decide between me and some other guy, and I'm in Baltimore, and they go positions in Dallas, right? So I asked them, and then I interviewed for Cisco too from up there, and I heard back from T-Mobile. I said, I haven't heard back from you. Why you haven't contacted me? They go, oh, well, we gave the job to another dude. That don't mean you didn't need to not let me know, because you got me hanging in the wind here because I had sealed it up. They're like, man, we want to take you, right? I'm like, man, I can do some RF planning and diagramming. I can figure all that out. Not a big deal. And I was like, but I never really worked for that operator. So I get a call from Cisco, and I do the interview from up there in Baltimore. And after that layoff, I hopped up, and after like 2 weeks or a month, I grabbed my stuff and I came back down here to Dallas. I was already here in Dallas, so my kids, my woman are here. I just went up there in Baltimore to do that. So I would travel back and forth, since I traveled my whole life with telecom anyway. Try to make it quick. And I got the interview with Cisco, and then I had a second round. That second round was 4 hours long, and they were drilling me for this and that. What do you know about this? I got hired for the mobile packet core, and I changed right away when I got in. So they called me up. Hey, you ready to come to work? Hell yeah, let's go. So since 2014, I was contracting like September 2014, and I hired on December 21st, 2015. So this would have been my 10 years, but if you're contractors, I've been there like 11 years here. So next year, December 21st will be my 10-year anniversary at Cisco. That's how that happened.
Wow. And so what are you doing at Cisco now? So 4G back then and now?
Okay, so I got hired for Cisco Mobile Packet Core, right? I knew all those guys already from working at IP Access. everybody I'm working with now, they were like, "Hey, you worked at IP Access?" I say, "Yeah, you don't remember me?" Because there's only 3 of us. And I would work 18 hours a day sometimes and keep like 72 tickets and keep it all straight. And we were using WebEx, of course, right? But a lot of these guys, I would know already, and I'm still working with them, which is cool because I've known them for years. So I get into Cisco, and I'm like, "Hey, already mobile packet core." So the guy that hired me said, "Hey, I'm moving over to policy. Would you like to come with me and learn this?" So I wound up moving with Mark Morris. After 2 weeks, I worked for Joey Falcone the first time there. That was in Boxborough, but I was down here in Richardson. And I go say, "Sure, let's go, Mark." So I went over there with Mark Morris, and I became the policy expert. And I hired in as a grade 10 already. So I quickly became the team lead there, like pretty much overnight. And I learned policy. So I picked that up like
What's that?
in a minute. So you have mobile packet core and you have policy. Policy is this. This is how you get your mom and pop packages on your mobile phone. This is how I can strangle your band. Oh, you got unlimited, but you got really 2 gig. And then after that, we're going to slow down your bandwidth. So we can do all the policy. We push all the rules where the PCEF and the mobile network, the packet gateways, as gateway, those are the PCEF. They're the enforce the rules that we shove out there to those nodes. And that's what your phone gets stuck with. So you go to these operators, you buy a package, and yeah, I'm the reason your phone can slow down or speed up or, not happen at all, suspend it. And that all happens from the PCR policy controls and rules function. In 5G, they just call it the PCF. And now it's turned into, for private 5G, they don't even use the PCF. They use the ISE Identity Service Engine, which can do the same exact thing, right? Because they don't need
Reduce accounting. I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. So I moved over to policy, and I learned that. And so what happened real quick, they're like, "Oh, this guy knows Linux really good here." So the whole mobile packet core people, and I am the policy, but nobody wanted to work on this end of life equipment, which was called the WIM, the Wireless Element Manager, which was like an OMCR. And so, and all of this. So in an OMCR, you could talk to cell sites, upgrade those cell sites and everything. You didn't have to be on site to do it. You could do it all remotely. You could see your whole network. You could manage it all from the OMCR. OMCRs would be in a NOC a lot of times, but they weren't allowed to touch things as far as that. They could use that to manage and monitor their full network. And then they had the MUR, the Mobility Unified Reporting. So they would take all of your bulk stats, both of them, bulk stats, your WIM, and the WIM would also take in your black and white page listing, and we would shove that down to their network to say, okay, we're blocking these sites out from our whole network, so no porn for your kids, and things like that, or dangerous paths that you might click. And so nobody, "Hey, look at this guy, he learned this stuff, he learned policy, he's doing that." So they started to say, "Hey, here's a WIM, here's a MER ticket, they didn't care what it was, even if it was a mobile issue or packet core, not policy. They just gave me all that stuff." So I picked up 1, 2, 3, and then they came out with the Mural, which was an upgraded mirror. Mobility Unified Reporting Analytics, and we combined with another company to sell this product, sold it to T-Mobile, had it in their whole network, and it disappeared. I had them in nodes working. So with that Mural, I could tell you who in Seattle is on an iPhone 7, 8, 9, whatever iPhone, what browser they're using off your phone, what cell site they're connected to, right? You would get all of this data from that. And that's from bulk stats and doing these data analytics. So they would process that, right? And now we just have, now we have Grafana, and then we bought Splunk. So, that thing, we spent a lot of money on it, and it disappeared. It went away, never heard nothing about it. And so even now, I ask other people, "Did you remember that?" "Yeah, I remember we had it, and we just lost track of it. We had a couple of them were live, and who knows?" So, a wild experience. So when I came over there, I took all the end-of-life stuff. Now all that stuff don't even exist. There were in some other countries, they're still using older stuff, and it's like, oh, we don't support it anymore, so that kind of went to the wayside. And so since then, what I've been doing since past 2 years, I've been studying machine learning and AI, and I didn't start learning to code till I was 50 years old, which I was writing bash scripts, but like actually wrapping my head around some things. So as I took some classes with Andrew NG, who's the man, and these light bulbs just started going on. I'm like, hey, and here's where I'm going to wrap it up. Here comes the full loop. I wrote a thing when I got to Cisco after I was taking all of this stuff, and I go, oh, okay. That makes sense to me now. So it comes all the way back to that mixing board of music where I explain what a T1 is. And I'll send you the link there. I got it on my SharePoint somewhere. I'll show it to you. And I wrote a blog, and that was the only article. I was going to keep a running blog, but it's going to wrap up and seal up some of this conversation we've had right here, which has been a lot of fun.
Nice.
Man, what a career. It's amazing. All the things you've touched from physical switches to AI. What a journey.
Yeah. Hey, so January 26th last year, which is coming up, I got diagnosed with late stage 4 lung cancer, inoperable, metastasized over my whole body. It's about quality of life now. You got less than a year to live. Sticks and stones. Get out of my way, doc.
Sorry to hear that.
Sticks and stones. What you say can't hurt me. My whole family's got cancer in it, but I had lung cancer. So I was a Rasta man for a long time. I had the longest hair at Cisco until recently. I had 25 years worth of locks since 93 when I got out of the Air Force until I cut my hair here at Cisco when I turned 50. Dragging on the floor behind me, wrapped up in the chair at work, but I would keep it in a bun and you would never know. I had a couple locks in my beard too, down to my waist. Yeah. So when I get I had trimmed it up. So I had 5 years of growth back, but I didn't trim the beard. My wife was like, yeah, keep the beard. And my ex had passed the cancer too. And so the woman I'm with now, I met her in the Air Force in 89. And then the Air Force sent us 2 different ways. She had a 25-year marriage. I got married and divorced and then had a 17-year relationship, and she passed the cancer. And so me and she got a divorce, so we got back together. She contacted me on LinkedIn. And here's the real kicker is, so as I go through this cancer thing, she's there. Right. And so I had her cut my hair off. It felt like I was given sunburn for the brain cancer. I had these treatments, but when I took the chemo, my hair was pulling out like I had sunburn. My whole scalp was on fire. So we went to the Erykah Badu concert, and I went to wrap my hair up in a bun, and a big old chunk of dread ripped out of the back of my scalp, and man, it hurt and burned. So after the concert, I was like, here we go, take it off. We took it off, and then we left the beard. But with this chemo and the brain radiation, particle accelerator treatment is what they do, which is really cool equipment. He goes, you're going to lose your hair, but it'll be 2 weeks after we're done. So sure enough, my hair started to fall out, and so we got rid of that, and then my beard just slowly, even my armpit hair. But my hair on my 3 little hairs on my chest kind of stayed for some reason. So it kept going down until I finally decided all I got is these 2 big long dreadlocks stuck on the bottom of my chin. I got rid of those though, and my hair just started growing back 2, maybe 3 months ago. After I finished my 6th round of chemo in May, and since then I've been on 10 rounds of immunotherapy. So that was the chemotherapy was once a month, but you go in there for 3 days. Oh, it's a long, drawn out process. But the immunotherapy is just once every 3 weeks. I'm in and out of there in an hour, and that's to keep my immune system up for fighting the cancer. So I've went from an 8.5 centimeter by 6.3 centimeter by 2 centimeter big chunk was my big tumor in my left lung and the brain cancer, right? So over time, and I take brain scans, MRIs, PET scans, do all of that. I got them all 4 at one time. And then so the doctor can review that. I was doing it every 2 months. Now we've stretched it to 3. So I could see every time it was decreasing, I'm having a good response to the chemo, and even after that. So I'm in what they call remission. So my brain cancers, they had a 2 millimeter speck that they found on this last one. They can't even hardly see it anymore. It was all over my brain. They can't even hardly see it. And he goes, that's a good thing. So, when they do the MRI and stuff, it's like you get the so I had him rolling the mouse in and out so I could see my skull and eyeballs and stuff. I was like, hey, can you record your screen now? I want a copy of that. So, and that was hilarious. And, and my left lung, there's only 1 centimeter now, and he thinks that's a lesion, some scar tissue. So, and the only thing I'm left with is it was all over kidneys, liver, everywhere. I got a 2.5 centimeter on my left adrenal gland, and it hasn't grown and it hasn't shrunk at all. So we're just keeping an eye on that. So I'm not really worried about none of that no more. I kept working through chemo and immunotherapy. I'd be on a WebEx. They're like, where are you at? I'm like, I'm at the oncology department.
Having chemo.
But it's HIPAA, so I can't turn my computer like this and show you the room. There's other people in here. It's a privacy thing.
And they don't want to be on WebEx.
No, and they don't want to be on WebEx. And it's amazing how there's people for lung cancer, they're still smoking and still I'm like, how? As I stopped smoking, I used to smoke a lot of ganja. And that was it. I was smoking in a tobacco wrap. And that's why I got that lung cancer, because the cancer runs in my family is not that. It's pancreatic or kidney. So, and I'm like, out of all of this and this career, there's only one kind of cancer that I could have that would just make me crack up and keep a good attitude about life. And guess what that is? Small cell lung cancer. Create small cells. Yeah. So it goes right with my career. A small cell. Great. I worked at IP Access. Man, get out of here.
I have to ask, because you said there was a cool story about small cell and femtocell. Is that the story?
No, but
okay, because
that is a cool story though. No, here's a cool story. There's a femtocell, and I'm trying to think where it was. I got two really good ones. I took there was a T1 on some private line that ran some fiber out to this building, right? And there's a pico cell on there, which I think was forget their free 140. Yeah, anyway, it was 2G, but it's in this building, and it goes down every single night, and goes down for like an hour and a half, and comes back up. Nope, 5 people have been out there. I can't figure out what's going on. I test this line. I go out in a day, man, and run loop back tests, and nothing. We can't find nothing at all. I said, have you been out there at 3 a.m? I went out there at 3 a.m. You know what happens at 3 a.m? Well, I went in the room because there was an old school CSU DSU, right? And I'm looking at it, and that thing is hooked up to there, so it just had a little small backhaul. And I'm like, looking at this, and it's got one of those orange extension cords plugged into it. It's not a DC rack, this is an AC. So I'm looking at it, and it goes up through this false ceiling you could push up. I'm like, I followed that thing over there, and sure enough, it's 3 a.m, the thing goes out. So I go, and I looked, the whole CSU DSU loses power. I followed that cable around. I heard some noise. I walked around the hallway. The other side of that wall, if I could hop over through the roof, was a janitor's closet, and they had the big mop, a garbage disposal, and it's plugged in to that big industrial garbage disposal. So 3 a.m, he turns it on. Boom! All your service is gone, and he's done with this stuff. Things are back up from a janitor.
So here is a janitor story that I've been told since a while. It exists.
Exactly. I was like, it cannot go that way. Come on, it's not the famous janitor story, no.
Oh, sure is, and that's always me. You gotta. some people don't care about the deployments and installation. And I always did it like, I don't want to come back here. I don't want to fly back.
Ever.
I don't want to fly back to your town in your state in the middle of nowhere. It's in a cornfield just to go. Is the power on? Was it 3 a.m. as a janitor? I always thought that was. I've carried that one with me for years. So when I'm training and coaching other folks and troubleshooting, and I go, here's a good one for you. Don't ever underestimate anything. Right, man, have a good power source, right? Why do you didn't have your own? So they had one 19-inch rack in there. Why didn't you have your own thing? So to get the fiber in there, you know what they had? Neg 48 volts DC, 4 car batteries connected together with an inverter.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
Yeah. So you were
Strategies.
you were safe running off a DC. Right. But running off an AC with that janitor, no. So we flipped it over to DC. Probably say, hey, if you go over there and put these 4 batteries in there, because they had a rectifier and an inverter in there. I was like, it's getting its own charge. You ain't got to worry about it. Oh man. So that was a fun one because nobody went at 3 a.m. And it just took a minute for things to click on. Have you been at 3 a.m? Definitely exciting.
Yeah, man.
That's a
What a
good
story.
story.
Yeah.
The episode has been running for very long, Richard.
Oh, yeah.
I want to thank you. I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you for a great interview, for a bunch of life lessons. I'm still not recovered from the emotional roller coaster of your last stories. So,
I got 1 million of them. The show starts at 5.
We'll do an
Yeah,
episode 2, maybe.
I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you for this opportunity here, which is lets me know that I'm going to continue to. Hey, yeah. So I don't have a degree. Everybody around me's got degrees. Most everybody, let's say, came out of the Air Force or the military. Some people went back to school, and some people didn't. So I've worked all the way through here without a degree, but I go learn stuff, right? And I would always like a Linux. I was like, I've been working on it 10 years. I'm not going to go take a Red Hat certification. Doesn't do anything for me except make me spend money to go get a piece of paper. So I've kind of not done that, and I want to make. I'm in a round for a professional engineer. I want to get up to there with no degree at all. That's my goal, and that's my next step. But I do have my AI and ML certifications, which help a bunch. And I'm in my. So I took the Gen AI when they came out. All of this blew up in the middle of me taking my data science stuff, and I'm on my practical project. I present next Monday for my data science blue belt. And I'm on my Gen AI black belt. I'm 94% done, but you got to do a project. It took me 9 months to get a class that was taught by an instructor who don't even work for Cisco. And lo and behold, he's the guy running this project. So I had to wait for this class 9 months, and then it took another 6 months to get this. So a year and a half, basically, just to get this project, right? And so the whole meantime, I'm sitting there like, I'm going to lose this information. How am I? I'm not using it. I'm still troubleshooting T-Mobile stuff and taking escalations. So I just hopped in as Gen AI took off. People, I was like, hey, you're doing it wrong. Go to Degree and take the structured course. People are grabbing at straws, trying to figure it out. Right? Don't do that. Go take this free stuff Cisco is giving you and stay in it and see it to the end. So as soon as I finish my project, I'll have my data science blue belt. I've got my data literacy blue belt. I'm working on that one. I just didn't have time. And I'll be a black belt Gen AI as soon as I can get done with this blue belt in data science. But my recommendation to anybody trying to do that, and I'll wrap this up so we can go, is that if you want to learn how a car runs, become a data scientist, because you know how the engine is put together and how it works as a system. If you want to learn Gen AI, just be a mechanic. You'll know how to change change the tires, change the oil, and do the maintenance checkup and things like that. But you're missing a lot of how it's all put together. Like, it's great you can grab an LLM, but do you know how to build a neural network?
Yeah, not the
Right.
same thing.
Yeah.
it's way more complicated, yeah.
Yeah. Well, not really. It's not really. I did my first thing on a Raspberry Pi, and I got me a $50 Google. It's called an accelerator. You can use it on your laptop too. plug it in. It's a TPU. So I used TensorFlow and shoved in a bunch of data about birds. And then you throw this one picture and it goes, yep, that's a macaw. That's a macaw parrot from Peru. Right. So I learned, I trained a Raspberry Pi to tell me, yes, that's a cat, not a giraffe. You know, but it's real easy. And it's amazing how a lot of that stuff still circles back to that 24 channel mixing board where I'm making music. Every last bit of it. And that's what my blog is on. And I'll share that link when we're out of here. When I get back to the office here in a little bit, I'll share that link with you so you can read over it. And you're going to go, wow, now it makes sense since you've already talked to me first. It's going to make a lot of sense to you.
We'll put it in the show notes on Spotify for sure.
Oh, right. Yeah, send me the link. I got Spotify free on T-Mobile. and Netflix free and Apple Plus TV free on T-Mobile.
This is not a T-Mobile commercial.
Yeah, and I don't really like T-Mobile. But you build those networks, you know, their operations teams, you know, and when we merged Sprint and T-Mobile, I knew people in Sprint for decades. When they got over to T-Mobile, they took over everything, and the T-Mobile people took a background seat. Their engineers did. So I'm like, ooh, I'm glad I don't have to hold that guy no more. Now I'm running with them, so they're a little more, but they're not an AT&T. They're by the book, you know. So, man, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing it later.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks again for your time, Richard. It was really nice to listen to all your stories and experience. It's great to have people like you in the company as role models, honestly. So thanks again. It was great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cisco Tech Stories podcast. You can subscribe to us on Cisco Podcast Network and SoundCloud or in your favorite podcasting app. You can also find us on X at Cisco Tech Story without S. Thanks again for listening and speak to you next month.
It's got a story from the time of analog. Veteran of the Air Force, wearing his dreadlocks. Building up the future from the circuits that he saw. From rotary to 5G, he's the master of them all. Richard Dreadlocks, fixing what we broke. With his hands of magic in a cloud of smoke. From the phones to networks, his skills invoke. Richard Dreadlocks, legendary folk. Old tech or new tech doesn't bother him at all. Switching out the pieces, catch him on the call. Turning static whispers into voices clear as bell. Richard knows the method, keeps us under his spell. Richard Dreadlocks, fixing what we broke. With his hands of magic in a cloud of smoke. From the phones to networks, his skills invoke. Richard Dreadlocks, legendary folk. Tinkering in twilight while the stars look on. Whispering the secrets from dusk until dawn. Every wire and signal under his control. Richard's got the rhythm, technology in his soul. Uniformed in wisdom from the Air Force days. Now he's weaving networked in dazzling ways. Locking down connections, never letting them sway. Richard's got the future firmly in his bay. force days. Now he's weaving networks in dazzling ways, locking down connections, never letting them sway. Richard's got the future